As Japanese automakers try to figure out how to respond to tariffs imposed by the US, it's worth looking at how their sales in the country have been holding up.
The tariff on imported aluminum and steel is now 50%. For Toyota, Honda, Nissan, and every Japanese automaker still sending parts, engines, and finished vehicles into the United States, it was a thunderclap. Not because it was unexpected, but because it made everything real.
General Motors announced today it is slashing its workforce by as many as 14,000 employees.
Drop 14,000 jobs.
14,000 jobs lost. 5 factories shut down. And Trump still thinks a 200% tariff will save the U.S. auto industry.
Also bad news for some American auto workers.
The automaker is temporarily laying off 900 employees at 5 U.S. factories in the Midwest.
I feel like the past 24 hours has just been a complete nightmare. 104% on imports coming from China. 104%. And that means my small business that I put everything into is fucking done.
Across global markets, attention is turning to the United States auto industry as several major manufacturers face plant slowdowns, layoffs, and shrinking exports. What is drawing even more attention is how closely Africa is watching these developments, not as a distant observer, but as a region increasingly connected to global manufacturing, shifts, and economic opportunity. First, the confirmed facts. Over the past year, multiple large auto producers in the United States have reported declining output in certain segments. Factors include rising production costs, supply chain disruptions, higher borrowing rates, and falling demand in some overseas markets. Several factories have reduced shifts, paused expansion plans, or announced job cuts. These moves have been publicly disclosed through corporate filings and labor notices. At the same time, trade policies introduced by the United States in recent years reshaped how vehicles, parts, and raw materials move across borders. Tariffs on steel, aluminum, and certain imported components raised input costs for manufacturers. Efforts to encourage domestic production also limited access to cheaper parts from abroad. While these policies aimed to strengthen local industry, their impact has been mixed. Analysts warn that auto manufacturing is highly sensitive to cost changes. Even small increases in material prices or financing costs can significantly affect profitability. When margins tighten, companies often respond by cutting production, delaying investment, or shifting operations to lower-cost regions. Global competition has intensified this pressure. Automakers in Asia and parts of Europe continue to expand electric vehicle production, supported by large-scale government incentives and integrated supply chains. As a result, U.S.-based firms face a challenging environment both at home and abroad. Africa enters this story in an unexpected way. Several African countries have spent the last decade building automotive assembly plants, parts manufacturing zones, and export hubs. These efforts are supported by regional trade agreements, improving infrastructure, and a growing workforce. As U.S. auto output struggles, African policymakers and investors are paying close attention. This could mean opportunity. When production contracts in one region, investment often seeks alternatives. Africa's lower labor costs, expanding consumer markets, and improving logistics make it increasingly attractive. Some global manufacturers have already announced new or expanded operations on the continent. African governments are also watching for lessons. The situation in the United States highlights the risks of rising costs and over-reliance on protective trade measures. Many African policymakers emphasize balanced strategies that attract investment while maintaining access to global supply chains. From a labor perspective, the contrast is striking. In the United States, auto workers face uncertainty as plants downsize or automate. In parts of Africa, automotive employment is growing, offering new skills and income to young populations. This shift is gradual but noticeable. Supply chains connect these developments. Vehicles require metals, electronics, energy, and logistics services. When U.S. demand slows, global suppliers feel it. Some African exporters of raw materials have seen reduced orders, while others are redirecting supply toward Asian and regional markets. Financial markets are responding cautiously. Auto-related stocks in the United States have shown volatility, reflecting uncertainty about future demand and policy direction. Investors are closely watching earnings reports for signs of stabilization or further decline. The implications extend beyond cars. The auto industry supports steel production, shipping, advertising, and retail. When it weakens, ripple effects spread across the economy. analysts warn that prolonged contraction could affect regional employment and local tax bases. Africa's interest is not rooted in celebration of another region's difficulty. Instead, it reflects strategic awareness. Economic shifts create openings. Countries that recognize these moments early can position themselves for long-term gain. Technology plays a role here as well. Electric vehicles and battery production are reshaping the industry. Access to critical minerals, many of which are found in Africa, is becoming increasingly important, as U.S. auto firms adjust. African producers of lithium, cobalt, and other materials are reassessing partnerships. This could mean Africa's role in the global auto industry moves from supplier to manufacturer. Assembly plants often follow raw materials. Skills training programs are already underway in several countries to support this transition. For the United States, the situation raises difficult questions. How can domestic industry remain competitive while managing costs and maintaining jobs? How should trade policy balance protection with flexibility? Analysts warn that rigid approaches can backfire in fast-moving global markets. Consumer behavior also matters. Rising vehicle prices have reduced affordability for many buyers. Higher interest rates have further dampened demand. When consumers delay purchases, production slows, creating a feedback loop. In Africa, demand is growing from a lower base. Urbanization and rising incomes are increasing vehicle ownership. Local production can meet this demand while reducing import costs. This dynamic attracts global manufacturers looking for growth. The geopolitical dimension cannot be ignored. Industrial strength influences national confidence and global standing. When iconic industries struggle, perceptions shift. Africa's attention reflects awareness that economic power is not fixed. Still, caution is necessary. Building an auto industry requires stable policy, reliable power, skilled labor, and access to markets. Africa's progress varies by country, and challenges remain. Analysts warn that opportunity must be matched by execution. The situation also highlights interconnectedness. Decisions made in Washington affect factories, workers, and investors thousands of miles away. In a globalized economy, domestic policy rarely stays domestic. Public reaction within the United States has been mixed. Some focus on protecting jobs at all costs. Others argue for adaptation and innovation. The debate reflects broader uncertainty about the future of manufacturing. For African audiences, the story is both a warning and a lesson. Industrial growth must be resilient to policy shifts and market changes. Diversification and flexibility are essential. As the auto industry continues to evolve, the next few years will be critical. Companies will choose where to invest, governments will refine policies, and workers will adapt to new realities. What happens next will shape global manufacturing patterns. Africa's growing role suggests the center of gravity may slowly shift. As viewers reflect on these developments, one thoughtful question remains. In a world where industrial fortunes can change quickly, how can countries build industries that are both competitive today and resilient tomorrow? The conversation around the United States auto industry continues to deepen as new data, worker testimonies, and international reactions add more layers to the story. What initially appeared as a series of isolated factory slowdowns is now being viewed by many economists as part of a wider structural shift. This shift is not happening in silence. Across Africa, policymakers, investors, and workers are paying close attention, not because they wish for disruption elsewhere, but because global industry movements often redefine where future growth will take place. In the United States, manufacturing towns built around auto plants are facing renewed uncertainty. When a major factory reduces output, the effect goes far beyond the assembly line. Local suppliers lose contracts, transport companies see fewer shipments, and service businesses feel the drop in spending. Analysts warn that these ripple effects can persist long after production resumes, especially if confidence is damaged. At the national level, vehicle production has long been seen as a symbol of industrial strength. When output declines, it raises concerns about competitiveness in a world where manufacturing is increasingly mobile. Higher energy costs, stricter regulatory environments, and changing consumer preferences have added pressure. While some companies are investing in automation and electric vehicle platforms, these transitions require time and capital. This could mean a prolonged adjustment period. During such periods, companies often reassess where future investments make the most sense. Cost efficiency, supply chain resilience, and market access become deciding factors. In recent years, several African countries have improved in all three areas, quietly reshaping perceptions of the continent's industrial potential. Africa's interest is also driven by demographics. A young and expanding workforce offers long-term labor availability, something aging industrial economies struggle to maintain. Training programs focused on mechanical engineering, robotics, and quality control are expanding. These efforts are supported by partnerships with foreign firms and regional institutions. Another factor drawing attention is trade alignment. Regional trade frameworks within Africa allow vehicles and parts produced in one country to move more freely across borders. This creates economies of scale that were previously difficult to achieve. Analysts warn that countries slow to adapt to these frameworks risk missing out on manufacturing waves that may not return. Meanwhile, supply chain disruptions have changed how companies think about distance. Events over the past few years showed that overly concentrated production networks are vulnerable. Diversification is now a priority. Africa's geographic position, connecting Atlantic and Indian Ocean trade routes, makes it increasingly attractive as a production and export hub. In the United States, debates continue over the best response. Some industry voices call for renewed incentives to keep production domestic. Others argue that competitiveness comes from innovation rather than protection. This tension shapes policy discussions and influences investor confidence. The electric vehicle transition adds complexity. Battery supply chains depend on minerals such as lithium, cobalt, and nickel. Many of these resources are abundant in Africa. As demand grows, partnerships around extraction, processing, and manufacturing become more valuable. This could mean Africa's role expands from raw material supplier to integrated industrial participant. Consumers are also reshaping the industry. Rising prices and changing mobility habits have altered purchasing patterns. In some regions, buyers are holding on to vehicles longer or turning to shared transportation. These trends affect production forecasts and investment decisions. For African economies, the lesson is clear. Industrial growth must be paired with domestic demand development. Manufacturing solely for export carries risks if global demand fluctuates. Encouraging local consumption helps stabilize production and employment. The environmental dimension cannot be ignored. Auto manufacturing faces increasing scrutiny over emissions and sustainability. New plants built in Africa often incorporate cleaner technologies from the start, avoiding costly retrofits later. This gives them a potential advantage as environmental standards tighten worldwide. In the United States, adapting existing facilities to new standards is expensive. This adds another layer of financial pressure. Analysts warn that delays in modernization could widen the gap between established producers and newer entrants. Global investors are watching closely. Capital flows follow perceived stability and growth. When uncertainty rises in one region, funds often seek alternatives. Africa's improving regulatory frameworks and investment protections have started to attract attention that once seemed unlikely. Still, challenges remain. Infrastructure gaps, energy reliability, and policy consistency vary widely across African countries. Success depends on addressing these issues systematically. Analysts warn that enthusiasm without preparation can lead to disappointment. Education and skills development remain central. Auto manufacturing today requires advanced technical knowledge. African countries investing in vocational training and engineering education position themselves better to capture long-term benefits. The broader implication is that industrial leadership is no longer guaranteed by history alone. It must be continually earned through adaptability. The situation facing the United States auto sector serves as a reminder that even dominant industries can face sudden pressure. Africa's watchful stance reflects a strategic mindset. By observing others' challenges, it can avoid repeating mistakes and adopt practices suited to a changing global economy. As global manufacturing realigns, cooperation and competition will coexist. Partnerships between companies across continents may become more common, blending experience with new capacity. The coming years will reveal whether current difficulties lead to renewal or lasting decline. Much depends on policy choices, investment decisions, and the ability to adapt to technological change. For viewers following this story, a thoughtful question remains. As global industries shift and new regions rise, how should countries prepare their workers and economies to stay relevant in a rapidly changing world?